Angelou. I know why the cage bird sings from chapter 21 to 27. All right. Oh, I just lost the page now. Okay. Okay, chapter 21. Bailey struck branches in the ground behind the house and covered them with a warm through blanket, making a tent. It was to be his Captain Marvel hideaway. Their initial girls into the mystery of sex. One by one, he took the impressed and the curious and adventurous into the gray shadows. After explaining that they were going to play Mama and Papa, I was assigned the role of baby and lookout. The girls were commanded to pull up their dresses, and then he lay on top and wiggled his hips. I sometimes had to lift the lap, our signal that an adult was approaching. So I saw their pathetic struggles even as they talked about school and the movies. He had been playing the game for about 6 months before he met Joyce. She was a country girl, about 4 years older than Bailey. Okay. Joyce had come to Stamps to live with a widow aunt who was even poorer than the poorest person in town. Joyce was quite advanced physical for her age. Her breasts were not the hard little knots of other girls her age. They filled out the tops of her skimpy little dress. She walked stiffly as if she was carrying a load of wood between her legs. I thought of her as being coarse, but Bailey said she was cute and that he wanted to play house with her. In the special way of woman, Joyce knew she had made conquests and managed to hang around the store in the late afternoon and all day Saturdays. She ran errands for Mama when we were busy in the store and sweated profusely often when she came in after running down the hill. Her cotton dress would cling to her thin body, and Bailey would glue his eyes on her until her clothes dried. Mama gave her small gifts of food to take to her aunt, and on Saturday, Uncle Willie would sometimes give her a dime for a show fare. During Passover week, we weren't allowed to go to the movies, and Bailey and Joyce decided that the three of us would play house. As usual, I'll be the baby. He strung the tent and Joyce crawled in first. Bailey told me to sit outside and play with my doll, and he went in and flapped and closed the flap. Well, ain't you going to open your trousers? Joyce's voice was muffled. No, you just pull your dress. There was rustle sound from the tent and the sides pouch out as if they were trying to stand up. Bailey asked, "What are you doing?" "Pulling off my drawers." "Wait, we can't do it with my drawers on." "Why not?" "How are you going to get to it?" Silence. My poor brother didn't know what she meant. I knew. I lifted the flap and said, "Joyce, don't you do that to my brother." She nearly screamed, but she kept her voice low. "Margaret, you closed that door." Bailey added, "Yes," and closed it. "You're supposed to be playing with your dolls, baby. I thought we would go to the hospital if he let her do that to him." So I warned him, "Bailey, if you let her do that to you, you'll be sorry." But he threatened that if I didn't close the door, he wouldn't speak to me for a month. So I let the end of the blanket fell and sat down on the grass in front of the tent. Joyce poked her head out and said in a sugary white woman in the movies voice, "Baby, you go get some wood. Daddy and I going to lit a fire, then I'm going to make you some cake." Then her voice changed as if she was going to hit me. "Go get." Bailey told me after that Joyce had hairs on her thing, and that she had gotten them from doing it with so many boys. She even had hair under her armpits, both of them. He was very proud of her accomplishments. As their love affair progressed, his stealing from the store increased. We had always taken candy and a few nickels and, of course, sour pickles, but Bailey, now called upon to feed Joyce's raving hunger, took cans of sardines and greasy Polish sausage, cheese, and even the expensive cans of pink salmon that our family could seldom afford to eat. Joyce's willingness to add odd jobs slackened about this time. She complained that she wasn't feeling all that well, but since now had a few coins, she still hung around the store, eating planters, peanuts, drinking Dr. Pepper. Mama ran her off a few times. Ain't you said you wasn't feeling well, Joyce? Hadn't you better get home and let your auntie do something for you? Yes, ma'am. Then reluctantly she went off the porch. Her stiff leg walk carried her up the hill and out of sight. I think she was Bailey's first love outside the family for him. She was the mother who let him get as close as he dreamed. The sister who wasn't moody and withdrawn, and teary and tender-hearted. All he had to do was kept the food coming in, and she kept the affliction flowing. It made no difference to him that she was almost a woman, or possibly it was just the difference which made her so appealing. You know? She was around for a few months, and as she had appeared out of limbo, she disappeared into nothingness. There was no gossip about her, no clues to leaving her or having her whereabouts. I've noticed a change in Bailey before I discovered that she was gone. He lost his interest in everything. He mumbled around, and would be safe to say he's paled. Mama noticed and said that he was feeling poorly because of the change in seasons. So she went to the woods for certain leaves, made him a tea, and forced him to drink it after he a spoonful of surplus and molasses. The fact that he didn't fight it, didn't try to talk his way out of taking the medicine, showed without a glimmer of doubt he was very sick. If I had disliked Joyce while she had Bailey in her grasp, I hated her for leaving. I missed the tolerance she had brought to him, and he had taken to telling me his secrets again. But now that she was gone, he revealed me in being uncommunicative. He's closed upon himself like a pond swallowing a stone. There was no evidence that he had ever opened up, and when I mentioned her, his response was, Joyce who? Months later, when Mama was waiting on Joyce's aunt, she said, yes, ma'am, Mrs. Goodman. Life is just one thing right after the other. Mrs. Goodman was leaning on the red Coca-Cola box. That's the blessed truth, Sister Henderson. She sipped the expensive drink. Things change so fast and make your head swim. That was Mama's way of opening up a conversation. I stayed mouse quiet so that I'll be able to hear the gossip and take it to Bailey. Now you take little Joyce. She used to be around the store all the time. Then she went up, just like smoke. We ain't seen seed hide, nor hear or her in months. No, ma'am, I shame to tell you what took her off. She settled in on the kitchen chair. Mama spiced me in the shadows. Sister, the Lord don't like the little jugs with big ears. You ain't got something to do? I'll find something for you. The truth had to float to me through the kitchen door. I ain't got much, Sister Henderson, but I give that child all I had. Mama said she bound that was true. She wouldn't say bet. After all I did, she ran off with one of those railroad porters. She was loose just like her mommy before her. You know how they say blood will tell. Mama asks, how did the snake catch her? Well, now, understand me, Sister Henderson. I don't hold this against you. I know you're a God-fearing woman, but it seems like she met him here. She was flustered. Such going on at the store. She asked at the store. Yes, ma'am. Remember when the bunch of Elks came over for their baseball game? Well, as it turns out, he was one of them. She left me a teensy note. Said people in stamps thought they were better than she was, and that she hadn't only made one friend, and that was her grandson. Said she was moving to Dallas, Texas, and going to marry that railroad porter. Mama said, "Do Lord?" Mrs. Goodman said, "You know, Sister Henderson, she wasn't with me long enough for me to get the real habit of her, but still I miss her. She was sweet when she wanted to be." Mama consoled her with, "Well, we got to keep our mind on the works of the book. It says, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away." Mrs. Goodman chimed in, and they finished the praise together. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I don't know how long Bailey had known about Joyce, but later in the evening, when I tried to bring her name into our conversation, he said, "Joyce, she's got somebody to do it to her all the time now." And that was the last time her name was mentioned. Chapter 22. The wind blew over the roof and ruffled the shingles. It whistled sharp until the door closed. The chimney made fearful sounds of protest as it was invaded by the urgent gust. A mile away of Kansas City, Kate crashes through the middle of town, blew its woo-wee warnings, and continued to unknown glamorous destination without looking back. There was going to be a storm, and it was a perfect night for rereading Jane Eyre. Bailey had finished his chores and was already behind the stove with Mark Twain. It was my turn to close the store, and my book, half read, lay on the candy counter. Since the weather was going to be bad, I was sure Uncle Willie would agree, in fact, encourage me to close early and join the family in Mama's bedroom, which functioned as our sitting room. Few people would be out in the weather that threatened a tornado. Mama agreed that I might as well close. I went out on the porch, closed the shutters, slipped the wooden bar over the door, and turned off the light. Pot rattles in the kitchen, where Mama was frying corn cakes to go with vegetable soup for supper, and the honey sounds and scent cautioned me as I read of Jane Eyre and the cold English mansion of a colder English gentleman. Uncle Willie was engrossed in the almanac, his nightly reading, and my brother was far away on the raft on the Mississippi. I was the first to hear the rattle on the back door. A rattle and knock, a knock and a rattle, but suspecting that it might have been the mad wife in the towner, I didn't credit it. Then Uncle Willie heard it and summoned Bailey back from Hung Fin to unlatch the bolt. Through the open door, the moonshine fell into the room in a cold radiance to revive our lamp light. We all waited, I with a dread expectations, for no human being was there. The wind alone came in struggling with a weak flame in a coil oil lamp, pushing the button about the family warmth of our pot-belly stove. Uncle Willie thought it must have been the storm and told Bailey to close the door. But just before he secured the raw wooden slab, a voice drifted through the crack. It wheezed, "Sister Henderson, Brother Willie." Bailey nearly closed the door again, but Willie asked who it is, and Mr. George Taylor, pinched brown face swarmed out of the gray and into the view. He assured himself that we wouldn't go to bed and was welcome in. When Mama saw him, she invited him to stay for supper and told him to stick some sweet potatoes in ashes to stretch the evening meal. Poor Brother Taylor had been taking meals all over town ever since he buried his wife in the summer. Maybe due to the fact that I was in my romantic period, or because children have built-in survival I feared he was interested in marrying Mama and moving in with us. Uncle Willie cradled the Amlek in his divided lap. You welcome here anytime, Brother Taylor, anytime, but this is the bad time. It's the right here. With his crippled hand, he read the Malik, that novel 12, a storm going to be moving over stamps out of the east. A rough night. Mr. Taylor remained exactly in the same position he had taken when he arrived, like a person too cold to read just. His body even to get closer to the fire. His neck was bent and the red light played over the polished skin of his hairless head. But his eyes bound me with a unique attraction. They sat deep in his little face and completely dominated the other features with a roundness which seems to be outlined in dark pencils, giving him an owlish appearance. And when he sensed my regarding him so steadily, his head hardly moved, but his eyes wearily swirled and landed on me. If his looks had contained contempt or patron, or any of the vulgar emotions revealed by adults in confrontations with children, I would have easily gone back to my book. But his eyes gave off a watery nothing, a nothingness which was completely unbearable. I saw a glassness observed before only in new marbles or a bottle topped embedded in a block of ice. He glanced, moved so swiftly from me. It was nearly impossible to imagine that I had in fact imagined the interchange. But as I say, you welcome. We can always make a place under this roof. Uncle Willie didn't seem to notice that Mr. Taylor was obviously to everything he said. Mama brought the soup into the room and took the kettle off the heater and placed the steaming pot on the fire. Uncle Willie continued, Mama, I told Brother Taylor he is welcome here any time. Mama said, that's right, Brother Taylor. You're not supposed to sit around that lonely house feeling sorry for yourself. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. I'm sure whether it was Mama's presence or the bubbling soup on the stove which influenced him, but Mr. Taylor appeared to have livened up considerably. He shook his shoulders as if shaken off a tiresome touch, and attempted a smile that failed. Sister Henderson, I sure appreciate. I mean, I don't know what I'll do if it wasn't for everybody. I mean, you don't know what it's worth to me to be able to? Well, I mean, I'm thankful. At each pause, he pecked his head over his chest like a turtle coming out of its shell, but his eyes didn't move. Mama, always self-conscious at public displays of emotions not traceable to a religious source, told me to come with her and we'll bring the bread and bowls. She carried the food and I trailed after her, bringing the kerosene lamp. The new light set the room in an eerie, harsh perspective. Bailey still sat, doubled over his book, a black hunchback groom, a finger running his eyes along the page. Uncle Willie and Mr. Taylor were frozen, like people in the book on the history of the American blacks. Now, come on, Brother Taylor. Mama was pressing a bowl of soup on him. You may not be hungry, but take this for nourishment. Her voice had the tender concern of a healthy person speaking to an invalid, and her plain statement rang thoroughly true. I'm thankful. Bailey came out of his absorption and went to wash his hands. Willie says the blessing. Mama sets Bailey's bowl down and bowed her head during grace. Bailey stood in the doorway, a figure of obedience, but I knew his mind was on Tom Sawyer and Jim, as mine would have been on Jane, Erie, and Mr. Rochester. But the glittering eyes of wizardness, old Mr. Taylor. Our guest doubtfully took a few spoonfuls of soup and bit of semicircle in the bread, then his bowl on the floor. Something in the fire held his attention as we ate noisily. Noticing his withdrawal, Mama said, "Don't do it. Don't do it for you to take on so. I know you all was together a long time." Uncle Willie said 40 years, but it's been around 6 months since she's gone to her rest. You got to keep faith. He never gives us more than we can bear. The statement hardened Mr. Taylor. He picked up his bowl again and rattled his spoon through the thick soup. Mama saw that she had had some contact, so she went on. You had a whole lot of good years. Got to be grateful for them. Only thing is, it's a pity you all didn't have some children. If my head had been down, I would have missed Mr. Taylor's metaphor. It was a change that came by steps, but rather it seems to me of a sudden. His bowl was on the floor with a thud, and his body leaned towards Mama from the hips. However, his face was the most striking feature of all. The brown expanse seems to darken with life, as if an inner aggregation played under his thin skin. The mouth, open to show the long teeth, was a dark room furnished with a few white chairs. Children. He gumballed the word around in his empty mouth. Yes, sir, children, Bailey used to be addressed. So look at him expensively. That what she wants. His eyes were vital and straining to jump from the imprisoning sockets. That's what she said, children. The air was weighted and thick. A bigger house had been set on our roof and was imperceptible, pushing us into the ground. Mama asked, in her nice folk voice, who said, Brother Taylor? She knew the answer. We all knew the answer. Florida. His title wrinkled hands were making fist, then straightening, then making fist again. She said it just last night. Bailey and I looked at each other and hunched my chair closer to him. Said I want some children. When he pitched his already high voice to what concerned a feminine level, or at any rate to his wife's, Miss Florida's level, it streaked across the room, zigzagging like lightning. Uncle Willie had stopped eating and was regarding him with something like pity. Maybe you was dreaming, Brother Taylor. Could have been a dream. Mama came in. That's right. You know that the children was reading me something the other day. Said folks dream about whatever was on their mind when they went to sleep. Mr. Taylor jerked himself. It wasn't no dream. I was wide awake as I am this very minute. He was angry, and the tension increased his little mask of strength. I tell you what happened. Oh Lord, a ghost story. I hated and dreaded long winter nights when late customers came to the store to sit around the heater, roasting peanuts and trying to best each other in telling lurid tales of ghosts and haunts and banish and jujus and voodoos and other anti-life stories. But a real one that happened to a real person, and last night it was going to be intolerable. I got up and walked to the window. Mrs. Florida Taylor's funeral in June came on the heels of our final exam. Bailey and Lewis and I had done very well and were pleased with ourselves and each other. The summer street golden in front of us with promises of picnics and fish fries, blackberries hunts, and concrete games till dark. It would have taken a personal loss to penetrate my sense of well-being. I had met and loved the Barnett sisters and had replaced Kipling's if with my friendship with Lewis and solidified over Jack's hopscotch and Confessions' deep and dark exchange. After many, across your heart and you won't tell, I never told about St. Louis to her, and had generally came to believe that the nightmare with its attendant guilt and fear hadn't really happened to me. It happened to a nasty little girl years before, who had no chain on me at all. At first, the news that Mrs. Taylor was dead did not strike me as a particular newsy bit of information. As children do, I thought that since she was very old, she had only one thing to do, that was to die. She was a pleasant enough woman, with her steps made menacing by age, and her little hands like gentle claws that liked to touch young skin. Each time she came to the store, I was forced to go up to her while she racked up her yellow nails down my cheeks. You sure got a pretty complexion. It was rare compliment in a world of very few words of praise, so it balanced being touched by the dry fingers. You're going to the funeral, sister? Mama wasn't asking a question. Mama said, you're going to cause Sister Taylor thought so much of you. She felt you, her yellow brooch. She told Brother Taylor, I want Sis Henderson's grandbabies to have my golden brooch, so you'll have to go. I had followed a few coffins up the hill from the church to the cemetery, but because Mama said I was tender-hearted, I had never been forced to sit through a funeral service. At 11 years old, death is more unreal than frightening. It seems a waste of a good afternoon to sit in church for a silly old brooch, which was not only golden, but too old for me to wear. But if Mama said I had to go, it was certain that I would be there. The mourners on the front benches sat in a blue serge, black crepe dress gloom. A funeral hymn made its way around the church tenderly but successfully. It eased into the heart of every thought, into the care of each happy memory, shattering the light and hopeful. On the other side of Jordan, there is a peace for the weary. There is a peace for me. The inevitable destination of all living things seems but a short step away. I had never considered before that dying, dead, passed away were words and phrases that might be even faintly connected with me. But on the one day oppressed beyond relief, my one morality was blown in upon me on sluggish tides of doom. No sooner had the mournful song run its course than the minister took to an altar and delivered a sermon that in my state gave little comfort. Its subject was, Out art my good and faithful servant with whom I am well pleased. His voice then waved itself through the somber vapors left by the drench. In a monotonous tone, he warned the listeners that this day might be your last, and best insured against dying a sinner was to make your right with God, so that on the fateful day he would say, Thou art my good and faithful servant with whom I am well pleased. After he had put the fear of a cold grave under our skin, he began to speak of Mrs. Taylor, a godly woman who gave to the poor, visited the sick, tied to the church, and in general lived a life of goodliness. At this point, he began to talk directly to the coffin, which I had noticed upon my arrival, and studiously avoided thereafter. I hungered you, and you gave me to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me to drink. I was sick, and you visited me. In prison, and you left me not. As you have done it unto the least of one of them, you have done it unto me. He bounded off the days and approached the velvet gray box. With an impressive gesture, he snatched the gray cloth off the open flap and gazed downwards into the mystery. Sleep on, thy graceful soul, till Christ calls you to come forth into his bright heaven. He continued speaking directly to the dead woman, and I half wish she would rise up and answer him. Offended by the coarseness of his approach, a scream burst from Mr. Taylor. He stood up suddenly and lengthened his arms towards the minister, the coffin, and his wife's corpse. For a long time he hove his back to the church, as intrusive words kept falling around the room, rich with promise, full with warnings. Mama and the other ladies caught him in the time to bring him back to the bench, where he quickly folded upon himself like a breaking rabbit rag doll. Mr. Taylor and the high church officials were the first to file around the bider to wave farewell to the depart and get a glimpse of what laid in store for all men. Then on heavy feet, made more ponderous by the guilt of the living, viewing the dead, the adult church marched up to the coffin and back to their seats, their faces, which showed appreciation before reaching the coffin, revealed on the way down the opposite aisle a final confirmation of their fears. Watching them was a little like peeping through a window when the shade is not drawn flush. Although I didn't try, it was impossible not to record their roles in the drama. And then a black dress usher stuck her hand out woodenly towards the children's row. There was the shifty rushing of readiness, but finally a boy of 14 led us off. I dared not hang back, as much as I hated the idea of seeing Mrs. Taylor. Up the aisle, the moans and the screams merged within the sickness smell of woolen black clothes worn in the summer weather and green leaves whittling over yellow flowers. I couldn't distinguish whether I was smelling the gluttonous sounds of misery or hearing the cloying odor of death. I would have been easier to see her though the gaze, but instead I looked down on the stark face that seemed suddenly so open, so empty and evil. It knew secrets that I never wanted to share. The cheeks had fallen back to the ears and had put lipstick on the black mouth. The scent of decay was sweet and collapsing. It groped for life with a hunger, both greedy and hateful, but it was hypnotic. I wanted to be off, but my shoes had glued themselves to the floor. I had to hold on the sides of the coffin to remain standing. The unexpected halt in the moving line caused the children to press upon each other, and whispers of no small intent reached my ears. Moving along, sister, move along. It was Mama. Her voice tugged at my will. Someone pushed from the rear, so I was freed. Instantly, I surrendered myself to the grimness of death. The change it had been able to effect in Mrs. Taylor showed that its strength could not be resisted. Her high-pitched voice, which parted the air in the store, was forever stilled, and the plum brown face had been defeated and painted flat like a cow's dropping. The coffin was carried on a horse-drawn wagon to the cemetery, and all the way I communed with death's angels, questioning their choice of time, place, and person. For the first time, the burial ceremony had meaning for me. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It was certain that Mrs. Taylor was returning to the earth from whence she came. In face upon considering, I concluded that she had looked like a mud baby lying down on a white satin of her velvet coffin, a mud baby molded into form by creative children on a rainy day, soon to run back into the loose earth. The memory of the grim ceremony had been so real to me that I was surprised to look up and see Mama and Uncle Willie eating by the stove. They were either anxious nor hesitant, as if they knew a man has to say what he has to say. But I didn't want to hear any of it, and the wind already itself with me, threatening the china berry tree outside the back door. Last night, after I said my prayers, I laid down on the bed. Well, you know, it's the same bed she died on. Oh, if he shut up, Mama said, "Sister, sit down and eat your soup. Cold night like this, you'll need something hot in your stomach. Go on, Brother Taylor, please." I sat down as near Bailey as possible, Well, something told me to open my eyes. What kind of something? Mama asked, not laying down her spoon. Yes, sir, Uncle Willie explained. There can be a good something, and there could be a bad something. Well, I wasn't sure, so I figured better open them, 'cause it could have been, well, either one. I did, and the first thing I saw a little baby angel. It was just as fat as a butterball and laughing. Eyes blue, blue, blue. Uncle Willie asked, a baby angel? Yes, it was laughing right in my face. Then I heard this long moan. Ah! Well, as you said, Sister Henderson, we've been together over 40 years. I know Florida's voice. I wasn't scared right then. I called Florida. Then that angel laughed harder, and then the moan got louder. I sat my bowl down and got closer to Bailey. Mrs. Taylor had been a very pleasant woman, smiling all the time and patient. The only thing that jarred and bothered me when she came in the store with was her voice. Like a near-deaf person, she screamed, half not hearing what she was saying and partially hoping her listeners would reply in kind. That was when she was living. The thought of that voice coming out of the grave and all the way down the hill from the cemetery, hanging over my head, was enough to straighten my hair. Yes, sir. He was looking at the stove, and the red glove fell on his face. It seems as if he had a fire going on inside his head. First I called, Florida, Florida, what do you want? And that devilish angel kept on laughing to the beat of the band. Mr. Taylor tried to laugh and only succeeded in looking frightened. I want some. Then when she said, I said, I want some. He made his voice sound like the wind. If the wind had bronchial pneumonia, he wheezed, I want some children. Bailey and I met halfway on the drafty floor. Mama said, now, Brother Taylor, could be you was dreaming? You know they say whether you goes to bed with on your mind. No, Mama, Sister Henderson, I was wide awake as I am right now. Did she let you see her? Uncle Willie had a dreamy look on his face. No, Willie, all I seed was that fat little white baby angel. But wasn't no mistake that voice. I want some children. The cold wind had frozen my feet and my spine. Mrs. Taylor's impression had chilled my blood. Mama said, Sister, go, bring the long fork to take the potatoes out. Ma'am, surely she didn't mean the long fork that hung on the wall behind the kitchen stove a scary million miles away. I said, go get the fork. The potatoes are burning. I unwounded my legs from the grip and fear and almost tripped it onto the stove. Mama said that child would stumble over the pattern in a rug. Go on, Brother Taylor. Did she say any more? I didn't want to hear it if she did, but I wasn't eager to leave the lightened room from my family and sat around the friendly fire. Well, she said, a few more times, then that angel started to walk off the ceiling. I tell you, I was pert, near scared stiff. I had reached that no man's ocean of darkness. No great decision was called for. I knew it would be torturous to go through the thick blackness of Uncle Willie's bedroom, but it would be easier than staying around to hear the ghostly stories. Also, I couldn't afford to aggravate Mama. When she was displeased, she made me sleep on the edge of the bed, and that night I knew I needed to be close to her. 1 foot into the darkness, and then the sense of detachment from reality nearly made me panic. The idea came to me that I might never get out into the light again. Quickly, I found the door leading back to the familiar, but as I opened it, the awful story reached out and tried to grab my ears. I closed the door. Naturally, I believed in haunts and ghosts and things. Having been raised by a super religious southern black grandmother, it would have been abominable had I been superstitious. The trip to the kitchen and back could not have taken more than 2 minutes, yet in that time I tramped through swampy cemeteries, climbed over the dusty gravestones, and elder litters of night black cats. Back in the family circle, I remarked to myself how I like a cyclopede. I was the belly of the red hot stove. It reminded me of the time when my daddy died. You know, we were close. Mr. Taylor had hypnotized himself into the eerie world of horrors. I broke into his reminiscing. Mama, here's the fork. Bailey had laid down on his side behind the stove, and his eyes were shining. He was more fascinated with Mr. Taylor's forbidden interest in his story than with the tales itself. Mama put her hand on the arm and said, "You shaking, sister? What's the matter?" My skin still ripped from the experience of fear. Uncle Willie laughed and said maybe she was scared to go to the kitchen. His high little laugh didn't fool me. Everyone was uneasy at being beaconed onto the unknown. No, sir, I ain't even seen nothing so clear as that little angel baby. His jaws were scissoring on the already mushy sweet potatoes, just laughing like a house on fire. What you reckon it mean, Sister Henderson? Mama had reared back in the rocking chair, a half smile on her face. If you sure you wasn't dreaming, Brother Taylor. I was as wide awake as I am. He was becoming angry again, and I am right now. Well then, maybe it means I ought to know when I'm asleep and when I'm awake. Maybe it means Sister Florida wants you to work with the children in the church. One thing I always used to tell Florida, people won't let you get your words in edgewise. Could be she's trying to tell you I ain't crazy, you know. My mind's just as good as it was to take a Sunday school class 30 years ago. If I said I was awake when I saw that little fat angel, then people out too. Sunday school needs more teachers. Lord knows that's so. Believe me when I say so. The remarks and respondents were like a ping pong game, with each volleyball clearing the net and flying back to the opposition. The sense of what they were saying became lost, and only the exercise remained. The exchange was conducted with the certainty of a measured hoedown and had the jerkiness of Monday's wash snappers in the window cracking the west, with only the intent to whip in the dampness of the cloth. Within a few minutes, the intoxication of doom had fled, as if it had never been. Mama was encouraging Mr. Taylor to take in one of the jerkin boys to help him with his farm. Uncle Willie was nodding at the fire, and Bailey had escaped back to the calm adventures of Huckleberry Finn. The change in the room was remarkable. Shadows which had lengthened and darkened over the bed in the corner had disappeared, or revealed themselves at dark, unfamiliar ages of familiar chairs and such. The light which dashed on the ceiling steadied and intimidated rabbits rather than lions, and donkeys instead of ghosts. I laid a pallet for Mr. Taylor in Uncle Willie's room and crawled under Mama, who I knew for the first time was so good and righteous she could command the fretful spirit as Jesus commanded the sea, "Peace, be still." Chapter 23. The children and stamps trembled visibly with anticipation. Some adults were excited too, but to be certain, the whole young population had came down with graduation. Large classes were graduating from both the grammar school and the high school. Even those were years removed from their own days of glorious release were anxious to help with preparation as a kind of dark run. The junior students who were moving into a vacational classes chairs were traditionally bound to show their talents for leadership and management. They strutted through the school and around the campus, exerting pressure on the lower grades. Their authority was so new that occasionally, if they're pressed a little too hard, it had been overlooked. After all, their next term was coming, and it never hurt a sixth grader to have a play sister in the 8th grade, or the 10th grade student to be able to call a 12th grader Buddha. So all endured in a spirit of shared understanding, but the graduates' classes themselves were the noble. Like travelers with destinations on their minds, the graduates were remarkable forgetful. They came to the school without their books or tablets or even pencils. Volunteers fell over themselves to secure replacement for missing equipment. When accepted, the willing workers might or might not be thanked, and it was of no importance to the pre-graduates. Even teachers was respected of how now quiet and aging seniors tend to speak to them, if not as equal as being only slightly lower than themselves. After tests were returned and grades given, the student body, which acted like an extended family, knew who did well, who excelled, and what pitiful ones had failed. Unlike the White House School, Latifi Country Training School distinguished itself by having neither lawn nor hedges, nor tennis court, nor climbing ivy. Its two buildings went on set on a dirt hill with no fence to limit either its boundaries or those of Borden Farm. There was a large expanse to the left of the school, which was used alternately as a baseball diamond or basketball court. Rusty hoops on swaying poles represented the permanent recreation equipment, although bats and balls could have been borrowed from the PE teacher if Boren was qualified and if the diamond wasn't occupied. Over this rocky area revealed by a few shady tall permission trees that graduating class walked, the girls often held hands and no longer bothered to speak to the lower students. There was a sadness about them, as if this old world was not their home and they were bound for higher ground. The boys on the other side had become more friendly, more outgoing, a decided change from the closed attitude they projected while studying for their finals. Now they seemed not ready to give up the old school, the familiar path and classrooms. Only a small percentage would be continuing on to college, one of the South A&M schools, which trained black youth to be carpenters, farmers, handymen, mansions, maids, cooks, and baby nurses. Their future rode heavy on their shoulders and blinded them to collectively joy that had prevailed their lives of the boys and girls in the grammar school graduating class. Parents who could afford it had ordered new shoes and ready-made clothes for them from Sears and Roebuck or Montgomery Ward. They also engaged the best seamstress to make the floating graduating dresses and to cut down second-hand pants, which would be pressed to military silkness for the important event. Oh, it was important, all right. White folks would attend the ceremony, and 2 or 3 would speak of God and home and the Southern way of life. And Mrs. Parsons, the principal's wife, would play the graduate march, while the lower grade graduate prepared down the aisles and took their seats below the platform. The high school seniors would wait in empty classrooms to make their dramatic entrance. In the store, I was the person of the moment, the birthday girl. The center, Bailey, had graduated the year before, although to do so he had to forfeit all the pleasures to make up for his time lost in Baton Rouge. My class was wearing buttery yellow dresses, and Mama lanched out on me. She smocked the yolk into the tiny crisscrossing puckers, then swirled the rest of the bodiness. Her dark fingers ducked in and out of the lemonly cloth, and she embroidered raised daisies around the hem. Before she considered herself finished, she had added a croche cuff on the puff sleeves and a pointy crochet collar. I was going to be lovely, a walking model of all the variety styles of fine hand sewing. It didn't worry me that I was only 12 years old and merely graduating from the 8th grade. Besides, many teachers in Arkansas in the black schools that had only that diploma and were licensed to impart wisdom. The days had come longer and more noticeable. The faded badge of former times had been replaced with strong and sure colors. I began to see my classmates' clothes, their skin tones, and the dust that waved off the willows. Clouds that lazed across the sky were objects of great concern to me. Their shifter shapes might have held a message that in my new happiness and with a little bit of time, I'll soon disappear. During the period I looked at the arch of the heavenly so religiously, my neck kept a steady ache. I had taken to smiling more often, and my jaw hurt from the unconscious, accustomed activity. Between the two physical sore spots, I suppose I could have been uncomfortable, but that was not the case. As a member of the winning team, I had outstanded unpleasant sensation by miles. I was headed for the freedom of open fields. Youth and social approval it aligned themselves with me, and we trembled memories of slight and insults. The wind of our swift passage remodeled my features. Lost tears were pounded to the mud and then to the dust. Years withdrawn were brushed aside and left behind as hanging ropes of artistic moss. My work alone had rewarded me a top place, and I was going to be one of the first called in the graduation ceremony. On the classroom blackboard, as well as on the bulletin board in the auditorium, there was blue stars and white stars and red stars. No absences, no tardiness, and my academic work was among the best of the year. I could have said the preamble to Constitution even faster than Bailey. We timed ourselves often. I had memorized the presidents of the United States from Washington to Roosevelt, as well as the alphabetical order. My hair pleased me too. Gradually, the black mass had lengthened and thickened, so can keep it as last as a braided pattern, and I didn't have to yank my scalp off when I tried to comb it. Lewis and I had released the exercises until we tried out ourselves. Henry Reed was class valedictorian. He was a small, very black boy with hooded eyes, a long, broad nose, and an oddly shaped head. I had admired for him years because each term he and I vied for the best grades in our class. Most often he bested me, but instead of being disappointed, I was pleased that we shared top places between us. Like many southern black children, he lived with his grandmother, who was as strict as Mama and as kind as she knew how to be. He was curious, respected, and soft-spoken to elders, but on the playground he chose to play the roughest game. I admire him. Anyone reckoned shiftily afraid or surfeitly dull could be polite. But to be able to operate at a top level with both adults and children was admirable. His valedictorian speech was entitled "To Be or Not to Be." The rigid 10th grade teacher had helped him write it. He'd been working on the dramatic stresses for months. The weeks until the graduation was filled with heavy activities. A group of small children were to be present in a play about buttercups and daisies and bunny rabbits. They could have been heard throughout the building practicing their hops and their little songs that sounded like silver bells. The older girls were assigned the task of making refreshments for the night festivities. A tangy scent of ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg, and chocolate wafered around the home economies building as the budding cooks made samples for themselves and their teachers. In every corner of the workshop, axes and saws split fresh timbers as the wood shop's boys made set and stage scenery. Only the graduates were left out of the general bustle. We were free to sit in the library at the back of the building or look in quiet, detachable, naturally on the measurements being taken for our event. Even the minister preached on graduation the Sunday before. His subject was, "Let your light so shine that men will see your good work and praise your Father who is in heaven." Although the sermon was purported to be addressed to us, he used the occasion to speak to backsliders, gamblers, in general. But since he had called our names at the beginning of the service, we were modified. Among the blacks, the tradition was to give presents to children, going only from one grade to another. How much more important this was when the person was graduating at the top of their class. Uncle Willie and Mama had sent away for a Mickey Mouse watch like Bailey's. Louis gave me an embroidered handkerchief. Mr. C, the minister's wife, made me an underskirt to wear for graduation. And nearly every customer gave me a nickel or maybe even a dime, with instructed keep on moving to higher grounds or some such encouragement. Amazingly, the great day finally dawned and I was out of bed before I knew it. I threw open the back door to see it more clearly, but Mama said, "Sister, come away from that door and put your robe on." I hoped the memory of that morning would ever leave me. Sunlight was itself still young, and the day had none of the innocence maturely, but would bring it in a few hours. In my robe and barefoot in the backyard, under cover of going to see about my new beans, I gave myself up to the gentle warmth and thanked God that no matter what evil I had done in my life, He had allowed me to live to see this day. Somewhere in my faithfulness, somewhere in my fatalism, I had expected to die accidentally and never had the chance to walk up the stairs in the auditorium and gracefully receive my hard-earned diploma. Out of God's mercy, Bosom, I have won the diploma. Bailey came out in his robe and gave me a box wrapped in Christmas paper. He said he had saved his money for months to pay for it. It felt like a box of chocolates, but I knew Bailey wouldn't save money to buy candy when he had all we could want under our nose. He was proud of the gift as I. It was a softened leather-bound copy of collection of poems by Edgar Allan Poe, or as Bailey, I called him Ep, turned to be an able leaf, and we walked up and down the garden rows, the cool dirt between our toes, reciting the beautiful sad lines. Mama made a Sunday breakfast, although it was only Friday. After we finished the blessings, I opened my eyes to find the watch on my plate. It was a dream of a day. Everything went smoothly to my credit. I didn't even have to remind it to or scold for anything. Near evening, I was too jittery to attend to chores, so Bailey volunteered to do all before his bath. Days before, we had made a sign for the store. As we turned out the lights, Mama hung the cupboard and over the doorknob. It read clearly, "Closed. Graduation." My dress fitted perfectly, and everyone said that I looked like a sunbeam in it. On the hill, going towards the school, Bailey walked behind with Uncle Willie, who muttered, "Go on, Jew." He wanted him to walk ahead with us because it embraced him to have to walk so slowly. Bailey said he let the ladies walk together, and the men would bring up the rear. We all laughed nicely. Little children dashed by out of the dark like fireflies. The crepe paper dresses and butterfly wings were not made for running, and we had heard more than one rip, dryly and regrettingly, "uh-oh," that followed. The school blazed without gate. The windows seemed cold and unfriendly from the lower hill. A sense of ill fate, timing crept over me. If Mama hadn't reached for my hand, I would have drifted back to Bailey and Uncle Willie, and possibly beyond. She made a few slut jokes and about my feet getting cold and tugged me under to the now strange building. Around the front steps, assured came back. There were my fellow greats, the graduating class, hair brushed back, legged oiled, new dresses and pressed pleats, fresh pocket handkerchiefs and little handbags, and all home sewn. All we were up to snuff all right. I joined my classmates and didn't even see my family go in to find seats in the crowded auditorium. The school band struck up a march and all classes filed in as been rehearsed. We stood in front of our seats as a sign on a signal form from the chore director. We sat, no, sooner. Had this been accomplished, then the band started to play the national anthem. We rose again and sang the song after we recited the plea of allegiance. We remained standing for a brief minute before the choir director and the principal signaled to us, rather desperately, I thought, to take our seats. The command was so unusual that our carefully rehearsed and smooth running machines was thrown off. For a full minute, we fumbled for our chairs and bumped into each other awkwardly. Habits change or suddenly under pressure. So in our state of nervous tension, we had been ready to follow our usual assembly pattern. The American National Anthem, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the song every black person I knew called the Black National Anthem. All done in the same key, with the same passion, and most all done in the same passion and the most. Finding my seat at last, I was overcome with the president of worst things to come. Something unrehearsed, unplanned was going to happen. We were going to be made to look bad. I remember being explicit in the choice of pronoun. It was we, the graduating class, the unit that concerned me. Then the principal welcomed the parents and friends and asked the baptism ministry to lead us in the prayer. His invocation was brief and punchy, and for a second I thought we were getting back on the high road to right action. When the principal came back to the days, however, his voice had changed. Sounds always affected me profoundly, and the principal's voice was one of my favorites during assembly. It melted and lowered weakly into the audience. It had not been in my plan to listen to him, but curiosity piqued, and I straightened up to give him my attention. He was talking about Booker T. Washington, our late great leader, who said we can be closed as the fingers on the hand. Then he said a few vague things about friendships and friendships of kindly people to those less fortunate than themselves. With that, his voice nearly faded thin away, like a river diminished into a stream and then to a trickle. But he cleared his throat and said, our speaker tonight, who is also our friend, came from Texas to deliver the commander's address. But due to irregular of the train schedule, he's going to, as they say, speak and run. He said that we understood and wanted the man to know that we were most grateful for. Most grateful for, but due to irregular train of schedule, he's going to, as they said, speak and run. He said that we understood and wanted the man to know that we were most grateful for the time he was able to give us, and then something about how we were willing always to adjust to another's program. Without more ado, I give you Mr. Edward Donvelli. Not one, but two white men came through the door off stage. The shorter one walked to the speaker's platform, and the tall one moved over to the center seat and sat down. But that was our principal's seat, and already occupied. The dislodged gentleman bounced around for a long time, too, before the baptism ministry gave him his chair. Then, more delightfully, the situation deserved, the minister walked off the stage. Donville looked at the audience once, sure, adjusted his glasses and began to read from the shift of papers. He was glad to be here and to see the work going on, just as if it was in our other schools at first. Amen from the audience. I willed the off. Okay. Fender to immediately death by choking on the word, but amens and yes sirs began to fall around the room like rain through a ragged umbrella. He told us of the wonderful changes we children in the stamps had in store. The central school had already been granted improvements that would be in use in the fall. A well-known artist was coming from the Little Rock to teach art to them. They were going to have the newest microscopes and chemistry's equipment. Okay. A well artist was coming from Little Rock to teach art to them. They were going to have newest equipment for their laboratory. Mr. Donneville didn't leave us long in the dark over who had made his improvements available to Central Highs. No, we were able to ignore, in general, betterment schemes he had in mind. He said that he had pointed out to the people a very high level that the first line football tackles at Arkansas and colleges had graduated from good old Phaeton Country Training School. Here fewer amens were heard. Those few that did break through lay dully in the sky with the heaviness of habit. He went on to praise us. He went on to say he had bragged that one of the best basketball players at Fisk and sank his first ball right here at the Laffey Country Training School. The white kids were going to have a chance to become maids, madams, Edisons, and Garners and other boys. But Jesse Owens and Joe Lewis's. Owens and the Browns Bomber were great heroes in our world. But what? School officials in the white Gotham of Little Rock had the right to decide that those two men must be our only heroes, who decided that for Henry Reed to become a scientist, he had to work like George Washington Cavender as a boot black to buy a lousy microscope. Bailey was obviously always going to be too small to be an athlete. So which consecrated Angelou to what country seated had decided that if my brother wanted to become a lawyer, he had to first pay pensions for his skin by picking cotton and hoeing corn and studying Corpenson's books at night for 20 years. The man's dead words fell like bricks around the auditorium, and too many settled in my belly. Concentrated by the hard-learned manners, I couldn't look behind me, but to my left and my right, the proud graduating class of 1940 had dropped their heads. Every girl in my row had found something new to do with her handkerchiefs. Some folded the tiny squirrels into love knots, some into triangles, but most were waddling them, then pressing them on their yellow laps. On the days the incident tragedy was replayed, Professor Patterson sat and sculptured rejected rigid. His large heavy body seems devoid of willingness or willingness. His eyes said he was no longer with us. The other teachers examined the flag notes in the windows which open on a now famous plain diamond, graduating the hush-hush magic times of frills and grifts, and graduated in diplomas, was finished before my name was called. The accomplishment was nothing. The maps drawn 3 colors of ink, learning the spelling, memorizing the whole of the rape of little trees. It was following for nothing. Don Valley had exposed to us. We were maids, the farmers, handymen, and washers. Okay. Woman and anything higher that was a spirit to farcical and presume. Then I wish that Gable, Processor, and Nat Turner had killed all their white folks in their beds, and that Abraham Lincoln had been assassinated before the signing of the embroidered proclamation, and the Harriet Tubman had been killed by that blown on her head, and Christopher Columbus had drawn in the Santa or Mary. It was awful to be black and have no control over my life. It was brutal to be young and already trained to sit quietly and listen to the charges brought against my color. With no chance of defense, we shall all be dead. I thought I should like to see us all dead, one on top of the other. A perimeter of flesh with white folks on top as the broad base. Then Indians were their silly teepee and wigman, and the blacks with their mops and recipe and cotton sacks spiritually sticking out of their mouths. The Dutch children should all stumble in their wooden shoes and break their necks. The French should choke to death, and the Louisiana phrase 1803, while silkworms at all the Chinese with their pigtails. As speeches, we were abomination, all of us. Mr. Don Valley was running for election and assured parents that he would win and would count on having the only colored paved playing field in the part of Arkansas. Also, he never looked up to acknowledge the grunts of acceptance. Also, were bound to get some new equipment for the home economies, building the workshop. He finished, and since there was no need to give any more, the most thank yous, he nodded to the men on the stage, and then the tall white man who was never introduced joined him at the door. They left with the attitude that now they were off to something really important. The ugliness they left was purple, and uninvited guests who wouldn't leave. The choir was summoned and sung a modern argument of onward Christian soldiers with new words pertaining to the graduates seeking their place in the world. But it didn't work. Lewis, the daughter of the baptism minister, recited Invictus, and I could have cried at the imprint of I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. My name had lost its ring of familiarity, and I had to be nudged to go and receive my diploma. All my preparation had fled. I nearly marched up to the stage like conqueror of Amazon. Nor did I look into the audience for Bailey's nod of approval. Margaret Johnson, I heard the name again. My honors were read. There were noises in the audience. Appreciation. I took my place on the stage as rehearsed. I thought about colors I hated. Beige, black, lavender. There was shuffling and rustling around me. Then Henry Reed was given his valedictorian address. To be or not to be? Hadn't he heard the white folks? We couldn't be, so the question was the waste of my time. Henry's voice came out clear and strong. I feared to look at him. Hadn't he gotten the message? There was no nobler in mind for blacks because the world didn't think we had minds. And they let us. And they let us know that. Outrageous fortune. Now that was a joke. When the ceremony was over, I had to tell Henry Reed some things. This is, I still cared. Not rub. Henry erased. And there's the erased in us. Henry had been a good student in the election. His voice rose on the tides of promise and fell on wares of warnings. The English teacher had helped him to create a summer swing through Hamlet. To be a man or doer and a builder, a leader, or to be a tool of unfunny joke, a crusher, a funky toadstools. I marveled that Henry could go through with the speech as if we had a choice. I had been listening and silently reviewing each sentence with my eyes closed. There was a harsh which in an audience warns that something unplanned is happening. I looked up and saw Henry Reed. The conservative, the proper, a student, turned his back to the audience and turned to us. And sing, nearly spoke, lift every voice and sing, till the earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. It was a poem written by James Weldon Johnson. It was the music composed by J. Ransom Johnson. It was the Black National Anthem. Out of the habit we were singing, our mothers and fathers stood in the dark hall and joined the hymn of encouragement. A kindergarten teacher led the small children onto the stage, and buttercups and daisies and bunny rabbits marked time and tried to follow. Stony the road we trode, bitter the chaser's road, felt in the days when hoped unbored and had died, yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers signed? Each child I knew had learned that song with his ABCs, and along with Jesus loves me, this I know. But I personally had never heard it before, never heard the words despite the thousand of times I sung them, never thought that they had anything to do with me. On the other hand, the words of Patrick Henry had made such an impression on me that I've been able to stretch myself tall and trembling, and saw I know not what course others may take, but as for me, gave me liberty or gave me death. And now I hear really for the first time, we came over away with the tears have been watered. We came trending our path through the blood of slaughters. While echoing of the song shivered in the air, Henry Reed bowed his head and said thank you, and returned to his place in the line. The tears that slipped down many faces were not wiped away in shame. We were on top again, and as always again, we survived the depths, had been icy and dark, and now bright song spoke to our souls. I was no longer simply a member of the proud graduating class of 1940. I was proud member of the wondering beautiful black race. Oh, black known and unknown poet, how often have your auction pains sustain us? Who will compute lonely nights made less lonely by your songs, or by the empty pots made less tragic by your tales? If you were a people much given to relieving secrets, we might raise moments and sacrifice to the memories of our poets. But slavery cured us of that weakness. It may be enough, however, it had said that we survived an exact relationship to the dedication of our poets. Okay, I'm going to stop there. The next slide, I'll read from chapter 24 and then all the way to chapter 27 or chapter 30. All right, thank you for staying on the live. Bye.